Hi, folks. There's about a 5 or 6 second delay on this, and sometimes it starts straight away, and other times it doesn't. So that's why I've been making sort of little sounds to get it kicked off. But hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. Now, in this essay, I'd like to talk about the Alex Jones trial, or more importantly, the verdict and the issues surrounding it. Now, we need to accept there's a very large and superbly well-funded establishment that's out to crush and destroy any sort of right-wing or centre-right or anyone who's not totally 110% on board with the globalist project, who's questioning the globalist project, who's calling out the failings of it and that sort of thing. Now, people who've got a small sort of following, they don't care about, which is probably why I haven't been arrested and thrown into prison yet. But Jones did have quite a big following, and so those are the ones they want to take out. And you'll notice that any commentator on YouTube or any of the platforms for that matter who questions or really lays bare the failings and shortcomings and the destructive effect of globalization, anyone like that is quickly neutralized on some bullshit made up charge of some sort or accusation. Now, Jones is no different. Jones falls into that category. Now, some of the stuff that he was into the sort of the tabloid journalism, and that's fine. There's plenty of that around. Gee whiz. Maybe that's not to your taste or someone else's, but he had a good following. Now, he was out there claiming some things were hoaxes or setups or fixes or whatever. There's a whole lot of people watching folks like Jones, waiting for him. How can we use what he's just said against him to get him? And so this was their big, as they saw it, their big opportunity. So they could go to aggrieved parties or potentially aggrieved parties, and the conversation would have gone something like this. One imagines, Billy Bob and Billie Jean, your child was injured or hurt or died or whatever. Or it doesn't matter. It could be something else. But you must be aggrieved about this. We've kind of moved on from it now. It was very traumatic at first. Well, look, I'm sure you are really aggrieved deep down, but what we think you can get several $1 million out of someone who said something that may be a bit upsetting to you. We think you can get several $1 million out, and guess what? We're going to pay all your legal fees. You won't have to pay a cent, not a penny. And win, lose or draw, we'll take care of everything. But we're poor people. We can't even afford to go to this or that. We can't afford to travel or can't afford the time off. Doesn't matter. We will cover all costs, all expenses. Everything is paid for. All we need you to do is sign right here on this bit of paper. Everything else will be taken care of. Oh, says Billy Bob. Wow. Okay. Well, where's the money coming from to do all this? You don't need to know. Now, the money's coming from various things. It could be Soros. It could be a front organization. It could be a front for the Democrats. It could be anybody from anywhere. It doesn't matter. But the cause, the globalist cause, and the desire to neutralize by using the legal system to neutralize anybody who opposes it, that is very well funded. Extremely well funded. They control politicians, judges, district attorneys. I mean, the list is endless. They've got a real stranglehold on the apparatus of the legal apparatus of the state. So once they can get some aggrieved party to sign here, then they do the rest. The deep state does the rest. Those people are just unwitting pawns in a wider power game. Now, once they've got the thing rolling, then they still have to have a semblance of its legal process, but they can get into court and they can arrange very sympathetic judges. For example, they could arrange I'm talking hypothetically here, but they could arrange a judge who's maybe got a very leftist activist background, a lot of NGO work, working with social services, very leftist in the views, believes white men like Jones are worse than whale shit. They're the lowest of the low. They're evil. They're white, destructive male. They're fucking Hitler. So they've got total contempt for these people. Well, straight white males like that, they don't fucking deserve legal rights. They are so evil. Legal rights are just not justified here. But we've got to go through the motions, otherwise the horses might get spooked. So we kind of have to pretend we're doing this. So you find a judge like that, and maybe you get make sure that Mr. Jones's legal defence maybe just isn't quite as competent as they could be, and a few slip ups. There's hey, people are human, mistakes happen. Yeah, okay, and then before you know it, you get the guilty verdict. Now you have to look at this in sort of the wider, how are they able to get a judge that hates Jones but is extremely sympathetic to, well, not necessarily sympathetic to the other party, but they hate Jones, what he stands for, what he does. They, when the judge looks at Jones, it's one of just utter and total contempt. So how do you manage to get a judge like that? Because out of all the judges that are there, you on balance of probability, you're just as likely to get someone who's quite neutral. You may even get a few that would favour, Jones's position or be sympathetic towards it. But somehow you get an absolute rabid Jones hater as a judge. I mean, wow. I mean, is that a coincidence or exactly what is it? The jury selection, the way I'm just looking at the bits of the case I've seen. The folks that were going after Jones on the defamation case, I didn't think their representation was impressive at all. I thought they were quite ordinary. I reckon I could have done a better job than that. But Jones's legal team, similarly, this is only my opinion, of course, Jones's legal team similarly weren't of very high quality. I'm just watching some things they did, some of the missteps, some of the oversights, and some of the just a sloppiness, in my opinion, and that must have contributed to the jury's verdict. But the jury selection, it seemed odd to me that the jury like that would be selected. I was recently involved in a case where there's a guy who was in jury selection. And someone had been charged with corrupting minors, I guess you'd call it, and he, on his way to the jury selection process, said, "You can tell the fucking guy's scum. He's fucking guilty, and they should fucking put him in prison. What the fuck is he going?" That was the thing. Now, I was sort of interested, and I didn't say anything, but I thought, I'll see what happens here, to see if he'd be selected for the jury, and he wasn't. And he got up there, and they asked a couple of questions. He said a couple of things, and he was invited to leave. And I'm glad he did. You don't know whether the accused was guilty or not. That's a matter for the facts to decide. So I mentioned this in passing to him. Well, you think the guy was guilty, but you haven't heard any of the evidence yet. So, as if evidence matters. And I got the impression, certainly, and again, this is my opinion, that some of the people involved in Jones' case were of a similar mind, and I don't know how they would have got on the jury. So, to me, that's terrible sloppiness by the Jones's legal team to let that get past. But Jones has been held to a very high standard. So on 1 minute, Jones, well, he's not a journalist; he's just some schmo. when that suits them to sort of have him characterized in that sense. But then the minute they want to flip it, suddenly he is a journalist and he has to be held to this or that standard and so on. So I didn't like the way they played he was and wasn't a journalist, depending on what suited them. I thought that was very, very sloppy and in my view would form grounds for an appeal. But if you look at the standard Jones was held to, the behavioural standard, what he's allowed to say, why aren't all the journalists on the left held to that same standard? All the journalists that went on forever about the Russia hoax, or call all white people white supremacists, Nazi fascists, and these sorts of things. Why aren't they held to that same standard as Jones is? Why, when they outrageously misreported, even when they knew it was untrue, the Russian hoax or Chancellorville or any of these sort of things, and various other incidents that they've willfully misreported. Why aren't they held to that same standard as Alex Jones? And if they were, then a lot of those people would be suffering, extremely heavy and serious fines, if not doing prison time. But they're not held to that standard. Jones is held to that standard, or people on the right are held to that standard, or people who oppose globalisation are held to that standard. The same goes for the legal standard that Antifa and Black Lives Matter were held to, and then the folks on January 6th. The folks on January 6th are held to the absolute highest standard, whereas the Antifa and Black Lives Matter are held to the absolute lowest standard, lowest of the low standard. So this is how they play. This is how they play the game. Straight white folks are held to exceptionally high standards, whereas the minorities, the protected groups, are held to no or the lowest standard. You also see these things in divorce courts where, if he does it, then he may get 30 days in the prison and a fine. If she does it, nobody cares. Exactly the same thing. So this idea of applying justice equally and universally, or the law equally and universally, and through due legal process, giving equal weight to the evidence of all parties, then that isn't the case. The protected group is allowed to make allegations baseless and without evidence, but the court treats it as fact. Whereas and I'm using it figuratively here, the straight white male has to have the absolute highest burden of proof, maximum burden of proof imaginable. And you look at the way, say, Kyle Rittenhouse was treated, how they could even get charges up against him was an outrage, and it hung in the balance to the very end, even though he wasn't guilty of anything. But they had to, and they nearly pulled it off. I mean, it was a close run thing. They nearly pulled it off, and to date at least, I'm not aware that any of those people that defamed Mr. Rittenhouse ruthlessly and relentlessly, and that none of that, to my knowledge, none of them have been held to account in a court of law, and one hopes they will. Also, if you look at, say, the people who defame and slander or libel, James O'Keefe, or Project Veritas generally, including James O'Keefe, the lawyers demand, James O'Keefe's lawyers demand a retraction, and in some cases an apology, and most of the time they get it. If not a retraction, certainly a rewording and removing the offensive and untrue claims. But Project Veritas doesn't have that. I assume doesn't have the resources to go after every one of them. But technically they could, and they could go after each one of them for about the same level of slander or libel or whatever you like that Alex Jones was accused of. So we've got two systems of justice here, where if you've got the wrong politics, baby, you're going down, and there's a vast war chest of money, massive war chest of money to go after people like Alex Jones to crush them. But there's no such equivalent war chest to go after the people who would defame Alex Jones or defame Donald Trump or commit the most libelous and slanderous acts. So we need to come to a situation where there is a vast war chest, just the equivalent, to go after people. And then you'll find that all these race hustlers and slanderers and globalist flunkies that are saying we're surrounded by Nazis and fascists and white supremacists and constantly pushing and creating racial and social division, they should all have to pay vast amounts of money and again, do jail time and so on. Now they probably have someone to pay all their bills, but if the other side can use the legal system to silence people they don't like or don't agree with, then why can't it be done in reverse? You've been with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for listening.